we're gonna find out what happens. I feel the softness of a kitten's fur and listen to that affectionate purr. I see it playfully chase a string and think life is a beautiful thing. I feel the heat from the rays of the sun, and the walks in the moonlight are always fun to have a sweetheart who listens to me sing. Life I know is such a beautiful thing. I watch the wings spread in the sky as its feathered arms carry it so high. And how about the happiness a newborn brings? Can life not at times be a beautiful thing? What would I do if I ever lose my eyes? Would it make me less any wise? Would I not still have the gift of feeling, which goes to prove that life is such a beautiful thing? Should having no arms make me sad? Should having no legs make me mad? If life is such a beautiful thing, then I'm thankful for what I should have be my theme. I feel the softness of a kitten's fur and listen to its affectionate purr. I see it playfully chase a string and think life is a beautiful thing.
This is a message for the youth, because we know what you listen to. And if you do what you do, because you do what you hear, this is for you, so perk up your ears. Straight up knowledge, the kind of shit you won't get in no college. Now you can check out this native MC, trusted and true. This native hip-hop with a new attitude. You might have noticed I'm a little bit older, but my attitude is whole lot bolder. I keep my eyes up on my shoulder for the younger MCs around the corner. Now you think you're gonna replace me? Ha! Come on up here and face me. And if you think that I am crazy, you haven't seen the half of me. So go ahead and try to stress me, but your shaky ass rhymes ain't impressing me. I'm tired of young MCs talking about the chicken shacks, when in your rhymes it's truth that you lack. I don't need to talk about the women who rub my skin, trying to get inside my pig pen. But if those be the girls that you like, you're gonna end up getting your blood spiked. So you better stop before you show your love. Better double up on your penal glove. Know what I'm saying? Before you pump up, you better wrap your thumb up. For those of you who want to talk about violence, I know you just want to break up the silence. I can talk about my AK-47. I could put a bullet in your head and send you to heaven. But if that's the way I start to yell, then my body's going straight to hell. Besides, I don't want to be like Michael Harris, pretending I'm oh so fearless, as long as the trigger's in someone else's hand. Is he really what you want to call a man? Not a chance. Now you want to talk about smoking an 8-4. I'm going to tell you about a man who had a great fall. Spent all night snorting up some snotty. Then he looked to the sky and said, got so high up inside his head, couldn't even make it to his bed. So when his heart failed that he had died, who do you think sat down and cried? Hot damn, not a goddamn soul. Druggies took his dope and dropped him in a hole. Now I have dealt with drugs, I have dealt with booze, and if you go that way, you do nothing but lose. I ain't trying to be tell you any lies. There's enough of that shit under our skies. My message comes from a different recipe. Starts with the teachings the elders taught to me. They said, look at all the people from sea to sea. But beware, brother, cause some will disagree. That peace must involve all the nations. That life is where we start communications. This message goes out to the youth. If you all do what you do because you do what you hear, this is for you, so perk up your ears. Straight up knowledge, the kind of shit you won't get in no college. You wanna try and change my flow? Here's something you better know. Everything that I write has to do with everyone's fight. Has to do with everyone's plight. Has to do with breaking the stereotype. And if peace is not your hype, I'll have to lyrically crush your type.
You don't know how free I am. You don't know how free I am. I am what I am, and I am free. You don't know how free I am.
Yo, check this. I might not be what you want me to be, so you might not see what you want to see. But if you got a minute, listen to what I gotta say, cause it's a brand new year and it's a brand new day. See, there's a gap between my culture and the life that I lead, so some will call me an apple, and some a bad seed. They have no idea how my heart will bleed. Their words and attitudes are things I just don't need.
You don't know how free I am. I am what I am, and I am free.
You see, I'm proud of who I am, and I'm proud of where I'm from. Those ones spreading racism, they're just fucking dumb. Now if you're looking at my life, and you say I've assimilated, to simplify things, just a little more complicated. See, I'm a modern day native, with a modern day life. I have modern day problems, and modern day strife. Now I hear other natives, they talk about the past, and will I do the same? Fuck that. See, I've got no time to dwell on what's already done. I've got too many things that I want to do. And they don't include knives, and they don't include guns. I'm talking about knowledge and sharing it too. See, my people need to learn how to cohabitate, get rid of the anger, and get rid of the hate. We gotta stop for a minute and learn to educate. And you'll see in the end, we all have to communicate. I know there'll be a time to make a stand and a time to fight, but if you do that, make sure the cause is right. Because if the cause is right and the cause is just, greater numbers of people will be backing you up. History has repeatedly shown to us all that united we stand and divided we fall. They were talking about natives and natives alone, because this is a big world and this world is our home. Now I've seen some beautiful people and ugly ones too, and there's no single color that comes into view. So the message I'm sending, it's not all that long. It's just, I want the human race to be stronger than strong. I said I just want the human race to be stronger than strong.
You all have to be strong.
Done it. Word.
We all have to be strong. Peace.
what I see is what I'll read. Why are we being so unkind? Hatred is just twisting my mind. All the big people fighting, the little people frightened, fighting in the house and fighting on the news. Woke up in the morning, and mama's got a bruise.
Look into the eyes of a child. Things are looking wild. Things are looking wild. Look into the eyes of a child. Things are looking wild. Things are looking wild. Look into the eyes of a child. Things are looking wild. Things are looking wild. Look into the eyes of a child. Things are looking wild.
Looking through the eyes of a child, things are looking wild.
I'm looking through the eyes of a child, and things are looking wild. Something doesn't seem right, doesn't sit well. Is this supposed to be normal? Someone do tell. From homicide to genocide to how do we hide all the bodies of the people who have died? And what if I'm gay? What if I'm black? What if I'm a Jew? What about that? And if I'm trans, do I deserve death? Do you call me names under your breath? When does it stop? When does it end? When do you decide to be my friend? When do we put down our guns, put down our knives? When do we start caring about lives? Could be someone close or could be a stranger. Why should there ever be a threat of danger? Because the way I see it, we're all the same. Only difference between us might be our name. Now I know you've heard this before. You live by the sword, you die by the sword. So drop that blade, stop keeping score. Just let out the love and let the peace soar.
I'm looking through the eyes of a child. Things are looking wild. Things are looking wild. I'm looking through the eyes of a child. Things are looking wild. Things are looking wild. I'm looking through the eyes of a child. Things are looking wild. Things are looking wild. I'm looking through the eyes of a child. Things are looking wild.
Looking
Through the eyes
through
of a
the
child.
eyes of a
Things are looking wild.
child,
Things are looking wild.
things are looking
I'm looking through the eyes of a child. Things are looking wild. Things are looking wild. Looking through the eyes of a child. Things are looking wild. Things are looking wild. Through the eyes of a child. Through the eyes of a child.
My name's Gallo Hyundai. My name is Gallo Hyundai. My name's Gallo Hyundai, and I'm a war for peace. All senseless attacks I see must cease. So what am I doing here? What do I really want to say? Is that this world has got to change its way. See, I'm going to fight for the red, white, yellow, and black. I'm going to fight for the ones who can't fight back. And I'm talking about all the preachers, from the water to the skies. I'm talking about all the issues, from the truth to the lies. And I'm gonna make my stand with a paper and a pen. You wanna argue that? Go back to bed again. Cause you're never gonna win against what I stand for. So sit down, shut up, and listen as I give you my grand tour. See, I'm going to target the corruption in the government. I'm going to target the poison in our environment. I'm going to target the injustices to the people. And I'm going to hit every target, or I won't keep still. See, I'm going to battle the battle of the battles. I'm going to shake up the cage until it rattles. You're never going to get rid of me. Not until the problems of the world are cut at the knee. You know what I'm saying? Kick this out one more time, so crystal clear is the message in my rhyme. I said my name is Galahundi, and I'm a war for peace. All senseless attacks I see must cease. I'm going to fight for the red, white, yellow, and black. I'm going to fight for the ones who can't fight back. So let's keep passing around our information, so we can improve this planet through education. Somebody's gotta make the people aware. Someone's gotta make everybody care. So pass that message on, if you dare. And whether it's mine or yours, we all got to share. Because there's more power in one man's voice than all the weapons of military choice. Now you put your voice with my voice, we can shout out loud that we belong to the human race, and that we are proud. You don't have to be a master of science to see that we need to create a worldwide alliance in order to approach the corporations that's asking people for their insubordinations. When they bring up what's happening to our waters and the diseases spread through our slaughters. And what about the government officials who stand behind them? Their backdoor handshakes and verbal deals that bind them. We have seen how the world can be devastated through the actions of men with minds of hatred. Look at Hitler, Charlie Manson, and even Osama. These are the men who've caused us trauma. I said these are the men who've caused us trauma. Then we have cops with hookers in the backseats. We have punk-ass teens knifing each other in the streets. We have drug dealers hooking up kids with crack. Why, there's a lot of shit in this world that's just whack. We have people who stand up for the rights and get shot down. Well, you better batten down the hatches. Cause we heading into the next round. Because there's no getting to a war without losses. Lenin, King, Gandhi, they're all on symbolic crosses. Now the speakers of the past are going to inspire the speakers of the future. We're gonna try to heal this world with a metaphorical suture. I said my name's Galahidi, and I'm a war for peace. All senseless attacks I see must cease. But I won't be able to move this world all alone. So just remember that this is also your home. So if I put my voice with your voice and we shout out together, people are gonna hear us. And things are gonna get better. Done it. All my relations. Peace. All my relations. Done it. Peace. All of my relations.
Gungilkwa zawadahan sios, ona angadaswa ohandagali wadekwa. Ungwetsu gwegwaska njedidowa wet nuni ni gwat nigula dana de tinu haladas na ungwetsu tinidohak ni gwat nigula. Agwegwaska njedidowa wet nuni ni gwat nigula dana de tinu haladas ni yakini ista ohun jage tinidohak ni gwat nigula. Agwegwaska njedidowa wet nuni ni gwat nigula dana de tinu haladas na ohun de su'a. Tinidohak ni gwat nigula. Agwegwaska njedidowa wet nuni ni gwat nigula dana de tinu haladas na ohun kwat su'a tinidohak ni gwat nigula. Agwegwaska jendidowa wet nuni ne gwat nigula dana de tinu halados ne onagat su'a. Tuni dohak ni guat nigula. Agwai guaska jenda doha hoi nuni ni guat nigula dana de tinu halados ne gahi su'a. Tuni dohak ni guat nigula. Agwai guaska jenda doha hoi nuni ni guat nigula dana de tinu halados ne gain tosula. Tuni dohak ni guat nigula. Agwai guaska jenda doha hoi nuni ni guat nigula dana de tinu halados ne gojo su'a. Tuni dohak ni guat nigula. Agwai guaska jenda doha hoi nuni ni guat nigula dana de tinu halados ne gondilio. Tuni dohak ni guat nigula. Agwai guaska jenda doha hoi nuni ni guat nigula dana de tinu halados ne ogwile su'a. Tuni dohak ni guat nigula. Agwai guaska jenda doha hoi nuni ni guat nigula dana de tinu halados ne ojido angoa. Tuni dohak ni guat nigula. Agwai guaska jenda doha hoi nuni ni guat nigula dana de tinu halados ne itisatugu on la diwaelas. Tuni dohak ni guat nigula. Agwai guaska jenda doha hoi nuni ni guat nigula dana de tinu halados ne geli ni gawalage. Tuni dohak ni guat nigula. Agwai guaska jenda doha hoi nuni ni guat nigula dana de tinu halados ne suguat jia gilkene galakwa. Tuni dohak ni guat nigula. Agwai guaska jenda doha hoi nuni ni guat nigula dana de tinu halados ne itisata santana galakwa. Tuni dohak ni guat nigula. Agwai guaska jenda doha hoi nuni ni guat nigula dana de tinu halados ne ojistokwa su'a. Tuni dohak ni guat nigula. Agwai guaska jenda doha hoi nuni ni guat nigula dana de tinu halados ne gele ni agwedige. Tuni dohak ni guat nigula. Agwai guaska jenda doha hoi nuni ni guat nigula dana dachi dinu halados ne sungwai diza. Tuni dohak ni guat nigula. Ono wa gali waho dungo nuwa ni dizlade dogat tena zike nigoha nizigi aizoda sundala aizawasa. Tuni dohak ni guat nigula.
We're gonna find out what happens. I feel the softness of a kitten's fur and listen to that affectionate purr. I see it playfully chase a string and think life is a beautiful thing. I feel the heat from the rays of the sun, and the walks in the moonlight are always fun to have a sweetheart who listens to me sing. Life I know is such a beautiful thing. I watch the wings spread in the sky as its feathered arms carry it so high. And how about the happiness the newborn brings? Can life not at times be a beautiful thing? What would I do if I ever lose my eyes? Would it make me less any wise? Would I not still have the gift of feeling, which goes to prove that life is such a beautiful thing? Should having no arms make me sad? Should having no legs make me mad? If life is such a beautiful thing, then I'm thankful for what I should have been, I think. I feel the softness of a kitten's fur and listen to its affectionate purr. I see it playfully chase a string and think life is a beautiful thing. Lyrics by Galiandi.
Siguli swagwag, yellow hindi niyo gets, wagi sli wagi, iwak at taloda. Unita arg ang gweh wanege, ani, bojo, tanse, okinapi, how, and yonko, yukodolas. Um, I'm just trying to figure out what's going on. Oh, there's my camera. There we go. So, today, pop-up stream. And welcome in, Fastian. Thank you for being here. So today, what I got to thank Fantastic Kitty actually for bringing up some of this stuff to me today. Well, she brought it up to me a few days ago, but today's first chance I've had to share some of this. But I want to share our first clip because people often ask why I discuss Palestine, because Palestine is um, not from North America or Turtle Island. However, there are some very common histories and um, experiences that our nations have gone through. Indigenous people from Palestine, from Australia, New Zealand, Turtle Island, have all kind of had some very similar experiences, even South Africa. Um, so there's indigenous peoples around the world who have gone through um, what we what we call colonization, and so colonization is an attempt essentially to erase a people. So the first thing I'm gonna share today is a short clip on how the methodology works when it comes to erasing a people, and it kind of parallels what's happening in Palestine with what happened with the indigenous peoples of Turtle Island. So you'll understand the connection as to why we stand with uh, the people of Gaza um, so easily, because we relate on so many levels, and you'll understand that more once you see this. The second thing we wanted to share is a history professor answering questions about dictatorships. Because, I mean, let's face it, we are essentially looking at a dictator in the U.S. Um, Regardless of what side of the fence you stand on, I think it's a little difficult to deny the actions of what's happening in the U.S. right now. And then the last thing we want to share is an actual documentary on how young Americans, young American Jews specifically, how they view Israel right now, today, and that their views have been changing over time. And I'd like to share this primarily because we get a lot of Palestinian perspectives in our documentaries and um, clips that we share, but we don't often hear from the Israeli side of perspectives. And so I'd like to share that so that we get the perspectives from Jewish people, but also from young Jewish people, because they are the ones who are coming up and becoming the future leaders and knowledge keepers of their culture, and so I just wanted to give a little bit of their side of things as far as you may or may not agree with it. In fact, I haven't even watched this whole documentary yet, so this is going to be a thing for me too. Now, the first two clips I have watched. I've watched the first one. I've watched half of the second one, but I haven't watched any of the third one. So I got three clips we're going to share today. Two of them are relatively short. The other one is a full documentary. So we are going to start with how to erase a people. So I'm going to get my old mug off the screen here so that this is not in the way, and we'll get this started.
If we could find the right piece of land and build them some really nice places.
Where would those pieces of land be?
Well, they could be in Jordan and they could be in Egypt.
Settlers have been trying to erase the indigenous for a very long time, and they've developed lots of tools for the toolbox: war, disease, famine, settlements, re-education camps. But there's one in particular that's been on my mind: forcible transfer.
And you'd have people living in a place that could be very beautiful.
It's interesting because if you survive the move, you're still alive. You carry with you your memories and you fight to pass them down to your children and them to theirs.
This is Cabri Forest.
But there's something else that dies. Something bigger and older than any individual life or home left behind. The essence of a people. So what exactly gets lost when you uproot a people? If you like our work and want to help us continue telling stories like this, you can become a paid member of our Patreon. Now back to the video. From the moment I saw this painting, I was mesmerized. Mostly by her hands. They're big and strong, and she carries all those oranges effortlessly, like her hands were made for it. She feels really familiar and looks so out of place. It's called The Immigrant by Palestinian artist Sleiman Mansour. I first saw it in Bethlehem in 2018 on my trip to Palestine. I was there alone, going through the grief and honor of being back on our land, not just for myself, but for the whole family. Because I was the first person able to actually go back. So I logged everything. Looking through all the pictures now, it's mostly of the land. Especially when I got to what used to be our village, Al-Kabri. It's on the outskirts of Akka, in the north of occupied Palestine. Our village is one of over 500 Palestinian towns and villages that were destroyed when Zionist militias ethnically cleansed Palestine. I took lots of pictures for my family to see, and for myself.
It's like we never existed.
To try to hold on to it. To this plot of earth that, to Israelis, is now a highway, a national forest, and a kibbutz. But to me, to us, this was home for, as far as we can trace it, a very long time.
We were driving through the kibbutz that they built, and you should see the trees that they have. I swear to God, a pomegranate tree with the biggest, fattest, ripest, most red pomegranate. The color is so vibrant, so healthy.
I asked my family what we used to grow on our land besides tobacco, which I knew. Vegetables, fruits, oranges, lemons, and grapes. It wasn't easy to get the information.
You don't understand how gorgeous it is here.
My dad reached out to his cousin, who asked his uncle, who also lived in the village. I wonder how much else we lost that I don't even know to ask about. See, when a people are uprooted, they may have survived, they may be alive, but there's something invaluable that can die. Something immaterial and bigger than any individual life. And it's this thing that explains what it means to be indigenous. I realized this when I was learning about another indigenous people halfway across the world. They called it Turtle Island, and for thousands of years it was home to millions of Native Americans. In the Pacific Northwest, abundant forests and waterways created cultures centered on fishing and forestry, like the Tlingit. Tlingit speakers don't say left or right, they say toward the water or toward the mountains. One ancient narrative they tell is of Salmon Boy, a story that speaks to how salmon, a central part of their sustenance and culture, feel, make choices, and respond to human actions. In the Great Plains, bison herding was the main way of life for tribes like the Lakota. So life followed the herds and was nomadic. Buffalo were central to survival, culture, and spirituality.
They clothed us, they fed us, they gave us inner strength to carry on.
The buffalo adopted the Indian, the Lakota, as his younger brother.
And in the southeast, fertile lands allowed for large-scale agriculture. This area was home to the Cherokee, who, along with others, used complex irrigation systems to grow the three sisters, corn, beans, and squash, grown together in a sustainable system where each plant supported the other. They also, along with many other tribes across North America, practiced controlled burning, which would clear undergrowth and make space for edible plants and medicinal herbs. This maintained healthy forests and reduced wildfires.
Work with nature, expand habitat, decenter humans, and design for perpetuity.
And there's way more. Before the first arrival of settlers, around 250 distinct languages were spoken. And each of these languages is inseparable from the land it comes from. The mountains, rivers, forests, and creatures of every region are woven into the language, stories, ceremonies, and way of life of the people who live there, and are considered animate beings. Losing access to this land would mean losing access to this language, which is losing an entire system of knowledge and spiritual connection. Unfortunately, that would come to happen for many Native American tribes, when settlers arrived with a very different philosophy towards the land.
They often mislabeled them as virgin land or wilderness instead of what they really were, living heirlooms, thousands of years in the making.
Settlers to the New World saw this land not as a living, breathing being, but as a blank canvas, a 2D backdrop to carve out a new civilizational fantasy. They did a lot to clear the natives: massacres, disease, broken treaties, but we're looking at forcible transfer. The most famous example comes from the Southeast. It's known as the Trail of Tears. It's when the US government forcibly removed thousands of indigenous people from their ancestral lands in the 1830s. People were marched at gunpoint with little food and poor shelter for hundreds of miles in extreme weather.
Sick and feeble, many near death. One woman was carrying her youngest child who was dying in her arms.
Those that survived the journey made it to a radically different terrain: Oklahoma. Thousands of years of self-sufficiency, language, science, medicine, diet, spirituality, all tethered to the land, suddenly suspended from the reality they're based on. In this new reality, resources weren't as abundant, and communities were split up. Previously self-sufficient and environmentally sustainable tribes became dependent on US government rations. Cut off from their sacred sites, ceremonies and spiritual practices began fading away. And they cut them off from one another. Children were sent to boarding schools where, separated from their families, they were forcibly assimilated into white Euro-American culture. Yes, they were alive, but something else was being killed. Inherited knowledge, science refined over generations, a responsibility to tend to the plants and animals of a region, a sense of collective self, totally uprooted. Things that define a culture and a people are learned organically, from just existing in your community on your land. Removing the land removes the space for that exchange, and splitting up communities makes trying to collect that knowledge to save it so much harder. I wonder what words we had in our dialect that we lost to the Nakba, what rituals around land we would perform, what creatures we tended to. I'm sure it's out there somewhere or in someone. Thankfully, they didn't manage to expel us all.
أتذكر هذا الشارع اللي أكل من إجري رأت وأنا رايح على المدرسة في المدرسة الكابرة أنا تعلمت كنا عايشين مش بيقولوا مهد عيسى يا أخي إحنا كنا عايشين في الجنة في مهد عيسى صدقني إن اكتفاء ذاتي جماعة فلاحين على قدنا عايشين بأرضنا مبسوطين.
But they expelled plenty. Just like Turtle Island, with tribes changing as the land does, Palestine's diverse terrain is home to diverse, old relationships to the land. That's why so many of our symbols are from the land. The sabr, the date, the figs, the grapes, the watermelon, the orange, za'atar, and of course, the olive tree. Every year after the first rainfall of October, it's harvesting season. Families gather to pick trees that are hundreds of years old on groves passed down from generation to generation.
When you ask them, for example, how do you think your olive yield is going to be this year? Their answer is always about, depends on my service. They believe they are serving the tree. And I know this all sounds so romantic in some way, but actually it's still in the language. They call it service. It is a relationship based on reciprocity rather than one person using the soil and abusing the soil to get the crop they want.
The land finds its way into Palestinian clothing too. The embroidery, or tatriz, on women's clothing would reflect the area, town, or village of the person wearing it and the natural landscape of every region. And the land is central in our music and our dance. And despite the differences from place to place, Palestinians have always been in communication with one another, trading and exchanging, traveling, gathering for ceremonies and festivals. Until they came.
The colonists' aggressive attitude towards the native peasants stemmed from their anger towards those who reminded them that there is still another people in the land of Israel that have been living there and does not intend to leave.
They say it was a land without a people for a people without a land, and that they made the desert bloom. In 1948, Zionist militias methodically ethnically cleansed Palestine for Zionist settlement, leading to the expulsion of 750,000 Palestinians from their homes. We call this the Nakba. The new reality was a fragmented Palestine carved into 4 new colonial geographies: the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, Jerusalem, and the 48 territories, what they call Israel. That's where our village was. Some Palestinians were able to remain, but many were effectively transferred to refugee camps both in these new territories and in neighboring countries like Jordan and Lebanon. My maternal grandmother was in the womb when her father was killed, the first martyr from our village, and her mother left on foot, alone, pregnant, and with 4 other children, to Lebanon. She made it to a camp called Burj al-Barajne, where my grandmother would be born and raised, and would eventually meet my grandfather. My paternal grandparents were from the same village. They left to Burj al-Barajne too. It's one of 12 Palestinian refugee camps in Lebanon that are still around today.
The camera's not even doing it justice, I swear to God.
I think it's hard to gather information about what we lost in Palestine because the trauma didn't end with leaving El-Kabri. It continued in Lebanon.
Their right to work and own property are limited by Lebanese law.
Life in Lebanon for Palestinian refugees was not easy. They left behind their property and their wealth and their lives to start from scratch in a new place, where they were and still are barred from working in 39 different fields, including law, engineering, and medicine.
اللي بعتذر منك ما مشغل فلسطينية. قلت له بس بدي أسألك سؤال إنه أنت مراءك خلقت لبناني يعني مراءك أنت خلقت لبناني وأنا خلقت فلسطيني؟ قال لي مش من عنا الوزارة ما بتقبل تشغل فلسطيني.
And then in 1975, there was the Lebanese Civil War.
The toll of human life is horrifying,
which started when Lebanese Falangist militias ambushed a bus carrying Palestinian civilians, killing 27 people.
When Jordan expelled the Palestinian guerrillas in 1970, many of them moved into Lebanon, from whose southern border they could stage raids against Israel.
We are against the Palestinian because we think that the whole problem is the Palestinian. We have 450,000 Palestinians in Lebanon. This is our problem.
The war lasted 15 years and saw thousands of Palestinians massacred.
The ruins of a Palestinian refugee camp on the outskirts of Beirut. The immensity of the crime shocked the world. The killers, members of a Lebanese rightist militia, got away as easily as they had arrived. To do so, they had to pass through Israeli lines.
During the war, Israel invaded Lebanon, overseeing massacres and bombing campaigns. My aunt Buran was killed when Israel bombed the bus she was on in 1982.
I guess that's it.
What's been passed down to me about Al-Kabri is factual. What we grew, who our neighbors were, how we lived. But there's information I crave that I'm not sure survived in our family. How did we tend to these plants? When did we harvest? What did we call a specific bud? What plants did we use medicinally? Like most Palestinian refugees, they left in a hurry with their keys in their pockets, expecting to come back. I don't think they had the time or luxury to pause and collect these tidbits in the middle of more unfolding trauma. Thankfully, not all of us were transferred. Many remained and continue to keep these traditions alive and are working on preserving and reviving them for future generations. But Israel continues to try to forcibly remove Palestinians from their land, either explicitly
to make sure that Gaza never poses a threat to Israel again. President Trump is taking it to a much higher level.
or by making life so unlivable that Palestinians might voluntarily leave.
Families on the move, just some of the tens of thousands of Palestinians whom Israeli soldiers have forced from their homes in the occupied West Bank.
What they did to Gaza, they're now doing to us.
In the West Bank, it looks like home demolitions, land seizures, tearing up roads, denying electricity, denying water. And there's a particular terror reserved for Palestinian shepherds and farmers, still deeply rooted in the land. And in Gaza, getting people to voluntarily leave looks like maintaining a suffocating, oppressive siege, where at one point, Israel even controlled how many calories made it in. And of course, indiscriminately decimating the strip, its people, its infrastructure, and its land. The orchards, farms, trees, soil, groundwater, sea, and air were all directly targeted to make Gaza unlivable, to break the connection to the land by breaking the land.
شجر الزيتون هذا كله هان مات تعرض لضربة قوية.
It wasn't just a genocide, it was also ecocide.
How many olive trees did you have?
4,500.
And how many of them did Israel destroy during this genocide?
All.
Is this the first time that Israel has destroyed your olive groves?
No, the fourth time.
But in the face of all this violence and terror, Palestinians remain. And not only do they remain, they return.
Started to smell like Gaza.
الله يرحم حامد يا أمه، الله يرحمه كان هو بيستقبلنا أول واحد يا أمه. بسيبها وبطلع، لا بموت في غزة وأنا بسيبها. بوس ترابها قبل ما تروح، بوس ترابها.
It's in these situations that the meaning of indigeneity is on full display. Despite having protections not afforded to Palestinians, in the face of danger, the settler flees because there's no tether to the land. That's why they say things like this.
Palestinians say they don't want to leave.
I don't know how they could want to stay. It's a demolition site.
The only reason the Palestinians want to go back to Gaza is they have no alternative.
Because to the settler, a good life is possible on any land. Land is just a place to live, a backdrop. It might have some excavated ideological story, but there's no relationship, no roots to keep them settled. That's why when they came to Palestine, they planted thousands of pine trees over the remnants of Palestinian villages. Trees for cover, trees for decoration, a prop. And why from when they arrived to this day, they don't seem to have difficulty burning and uprooting olive trees that are hundreds of years old. According to an Iroquois story of creation, the world was made when Sky Woman fell from above and was saved by the animals below. The geese caught her, the turtle carried her, and the muskrat dove to the bottom of the sea to bring her mud that she would use to make land. She spread the mud across the turtle's back and began to sing and dance in appreciation. And as she did, the land grew and grew from a smear of mud to what we know as the earth. It's why they call North America Turtle Island. The story speaks to a central philosophy in their culture, that the land is not our property, isn't ours to own. It welcomed us, saved us, and we feed it in return. It reminds me of how in Arabic we say أصحاب الأرض, which literally translates to friends of the land.
سامحنا لأن إحنا ما إحناش قادرين نحافظ عليك
Indigeneity doesn't just mean to live on a land for ages. If that were the case, settlers would eventually become indigenous too, and those forcibly transferred would stop being indigenous. To be indigenous means to be part of the land, part of its ecosystem, its tending, its caretaking. It's a responsibility and connection and inherited knowledge that you can't know in a lifetime. So when you remove people from their land and drop them somewhere foreign to them, you have severed the continuity of this ancient knowledge.
And our elders have told us that our job is to remember, to remember.
Unfortunately, some of it gets lost forever. But the wound this removal leaves, and the need to keep the connection alive, will always remain.
Shinasha means I am still here.
هاي رسالة من ستي اللي مواليد 1922 لترامب اللي بده يهجرنا. ما غصب عنك يا ستي بدهم يطلعونا.
ريت روحها تطلع. احنا ثابتين في الأرض زي الزيتون.
I'm Professor Ruth Ben-Ghiat. I study authoritarianism. Let's answer some questions from the internet. This is Tech Support Dictators. @System Kumar 999 asks, Bro, WTF is fascism? Fascism is a one-party state, classically, with an all-powerful dictator at its head, meaning no more separation of powers, no independent judiciary. Mussolini in the 1920s coined the term fascism. He also said everything in the state, nothing outside the state. So the state reaches into areas that in democracies, the state has no place. There's no more trade unions except the state unions. Employers and employees were in the same union, and that tells you what kind of union it was. Fascism is also classically expansionist. The conquest of territory, imperialism, is intrinsic to fascism. There is no sense of fascism without violence. Fascists truly believe, whether it's Hitler or Francisco Franco in Spain or Mussolini, that violence is the way you change the world. They declare one category of person as an enemy. It could be a racial enemy, as in Nazi Germany. It could be a political enemy, as it was in Italian fascism and for Francisco Franco in Spain. But that enemy must be exterminated. So the state organizes itself around the practice of violence. And regular people are trained to become vigilant and informers and use violence themselves. So violence is at the very core of fascism. Malice Liddell asks, why is Putin shirtless in so many of his pictures? Putin takes up where Mussolini left off in using his body as an emblem of strength. Mussolini stripped off his shirt. He was the first leader ever to do that on camera. And that stood for Italy's strength and dynamism and modernity. This idea of the dictator being the man everyone should look up to is very old. It goes back to the fascist years. This is a period cartoon making fun of Hitler. Goebbels, his propaganda minister, was depicting him as a kind of demigod. Dictators and authoritarians pose as the macho men, but they also create a climate in their countries of a kind of lawless masculinity that says that a real man should be able to have anyone and anything he wants without asking for consent. And so Berlusconi created such an atmosphere in Italy of misogyny that the United Nations issued a special report after he had been in and out of power for a decade, saying that there was grave risk to Italy's women because of the rise in domestic violence and hate crimes against women. Thebang asks, what defines a dictator? It comes from the verb to dictate. That gives us a clue. So a dictator is somebody who wants to get his way, doesn't care about public welfare, often is very, very corrupt, steals from the people, manipulates people through propaganda. They don't agree with the separation of powers, so the executive power becomes overwhelming in a dictatorship. A dictator is a leader who wants absolute power, someone who does not want his authority to be checked by any institution. And so he proceeds to take those institutions apart, to void them of all people who are not loyalists, to create his state in his own image and make everything be about him. At Angel Uma 5 asks, dictatorship, authoritarianism, autocracy, are the three forms of governance really different? Authoritarianism is a political system that often is dictatorship. You can have civilian dictatorships like the fascist dictatorships. You can have military dictatorships. Nowadays, some of the authoritarian leaders don't correspond to the one-party dictators of earlier times, like Mao or Hitler or Stalin. Autocracy is another name for the political system of authoritarianism. We have democracies where you have voting rights and the will of the people translates into the leadership, and autocracies where the leader does their best to stay in power no matter what the people think. Kozlowski from Reddit asks, how do dictators maintain power when it seems that most of the country is against them? Dictators use the authoritarian playbook. The playbook is, while you're running for office, while you're building up your power, you want to discredit journalists. You want to call them fake news or vermin or communists. And authoritarians do this because if evidence of their corruption comes out or their violent acts, they need the public to not believe the press, to think the press is lying. So there is no other voice telling the truth. The truth is gone. The Nazi term was the lying press. Today we talk about fake news. Many dictators use what today in Russia is called the fire hose of falsehood. This is a high volume of lies, half-truths, conspiracy theories, because conspiracy theories are as old as propaganda. The fact the Jews were supposed to be controlling the globe, that was a fascist conspiracy theory. Dictators also maintain power by creating an atmosphere of terror, of intimidation, whether it's physical violence against enemies of the state, or today they harass people with lawsuits, with smear campaigns. They try and ruin you because the goal is to get you to self-censor. Then you're doing the dictator's work for him. AVJ164B from Reddit asks, what are the differences between a fascist dictatorship and a communist dictatorship? They do many, many things in common. They have an all-powerful leader with a personality cult. They use propaganda. The difference is in who the target is. So fascists go after leftists. And although National Socialism and Italian fascism took originally at their very beginnings from the left, as soon as they constituted into parties, their main enemy was the left. The most consistent targets of Nazism and fascism were communists and socialists. So fascist dictatorships are anti-communist. Obviously, that's one huge difference from communist dictatorship. There, the targets, the enemies are counter-revolutionaries, anyone who's going to put the march of the revolution into jeopardy. And so Mao killed millions and millions of people, justifying it as getting rid of counter-revolutionaries. Jay Anderson asks, what are the most common personality traits tyrants and dictators possess? They are narcissists, meaning they care only about themselves. Dictators attract attention and adulation because they tend to be very charismatic. So they're very good performers. They're very good orators. They will do anything to preserve their power. For example, Benito Mussolini, the first fascist dictator, in 1924, he had his main political opponent killed. And in order to escape an investigation, he declared dictatorship. Dictators tend to be paranoid. They construct something called the inner sanctum. And this is an inner circle of advisors. And very common is that it includes family members. There's a whole history of sons-in-law being given important positions, from Benito Mussolini, the fascist, who had his son-in-law as foreign minister. Pinochet used his son-in-laws and put them at the head of the privatization agencies, so they made a lot of money. They also end up in this kind of cocoon where they start to believe their own propaganda and stop making good decisions. Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine in 2022 without consulting his military or his economic specialists adequately. And so the military had huge losses at the beginning of the Ukraine conflict. More generals died than since World War II at the beginning, because Putin did not listen to criticism and objective feedback. Dictators don't have any moral code. They will ally with anyone. Think about Hitler, the fascist, allying temporarily with Stalin, the communist. Think about today, Xi Jinping, the communist, allying with Vladimir Putin, the far-right leader. So that old Machiavellian saying, the ends justify the means, perfectly sum up the dictator's personality. At Vopicule June asks, why do dictators have statues and pictures of themselves all over the countries they oppress? Dictators have giant egos, but their secret is that they're very insecure. The rules of personality cults have not changed for 100 years. You have to be the man of the people. You speak in a plain language. You connect with the people. But you've also got to be the man above all other men, the man who's untouchable, the man who's kind of like a god. So they build statues of themselves to give a sense of this godliness, of this omnipotence. So the statues are their way of saying, I'm going to be here for 1,000 years. So dictators want to be omnipresent. They have so many reminders of themselves in every way, rituals, statues, books, photographs, and they become kind of inescapable. Take the Heil Hitler salute in Nazi Germany. Anytime you went into any social context, you had to perform it. You both used your hand to salute, but you had to say out loud, Heil Hitler. This brought Hitler into the conversation, into every conversation, even though he was not physically present. And what you were doing is saying you were submissive to him and wishing him good health. This corresponds to the desire of the dictator to be everywhere, and people should not have social relations without the dictator being part of them. And that's also why their populations get really sick of them. Mr. Cornfield asks, how do dictators come to power? They can be appointed, as the classic fascists were. Mussolini was appointed by the king. German elites, politicians brought in Hitler. Nowadays, dictators can come to power initially through elections and then become dictators. For example, Vladimir Putin, when he was put into place, he was backed by the oligarchs. At the beginning, he was not an all-powerful dictator. It takes people years to amass enough power to do that. About 75% of authoritarian regimes in the 20th century were created through coups. A group of soldiers and generals, they just take power. These can be civilian coups or military coups, but the point is that they impose themselves on power forcibly. At George Forrester 17 asks, WTF is a, quote, self-coup d'etat. A self-coup is a variety of coup when the leader is already in office. Perhaps you are the leader and you've lost an election. Well, you just refuse to leave. That's what Nicolas Maduro did in Venezuela. That's what Donald Trump tried to do through the January 6th insurrection, but in that case it failed. President Yoon of South Korea declared martial law instead of having to be impeached. In that case, it was promptly dismantled and he is under detention. The same thing happened in Peru in 2022. President Castillo was about to be impeached, so he refused to leave. He tried to have martial law. It was, again, very swiftly taken care of and justice was served. The joke was that President Castillo started his day as president and he ended it as a prisoner. It's very important to find perpetrators of self-coups accountable. This next question is from Kai. Did y'all know Hitler tried to overthrow the government during the beer hall putsch in 1923 but failed and was jailed. I did know, and it's important for everybody to know this history now. So Hitler tried to overthrow the government. He was put in jail in 1924. That's where he wrote Mein Kampf. When he came out, he was ranting and raving with his racist diatribes. He was not taken seriously, although several German states did prevent him from speaking publicly because of his hate speech. But then he promised to obey the Constitution to get those bans on his hate speech removed. And he proceeded to build up the Nazi Party over the 1920s. And then the Depression hit and social unrest increased. The left parties increased. And so German elites in 1933 decided to appoint Hitler, who by then was the leader of an increasingly popular party, to get rid of the left for them. So the German elites who brought Hitler into power thought they could control him and use him to get rid of the left. And then the rest was history, where they were not able to contain him and he ended up controlling them. Midwest Mama says many dictatorships criminalize abortion. China, Russia, several others say it's a woman's duty to breed as many children as possible for the state. That's correct, and we can ask why that is throughout history. Dictatorships, even in the case of China, where they had a one-child policy for many years, have now started to reverse this. And dictatorships in particular that have fantasies of national purity, of designing a perfect race, or of having more, as Viktor Orban says, Hungarian babies to combat the number of immigrant babies. All these different reasons are why many dictatorships and authoritarian states encourage the right kind of women to have babies. Along with the political opposition, journalists, LGBTQ people, women have been the enemy of the strongman. And every regime acts to take bodily autonomy away from women, take their agency away, and criminalizing abortion and rolling back or getting rid of reproductive rights is part of that. This next question is from Karen. Sake. Do Americans want to live in a dictatorship? Many Americans have no idea what dictatorship entails, but have been convinced that democracy is failing them and have seen dictators held up as superior role models. They have been conditioned by the media, by President Trump, to feel that autocrats, that dictators, whether it's Xi Jinping, whether it's Vladimir Putin, are superior brands of leaders. Studies have shown all over the world, about 30% of the population holds authoritarian leanings that are often expressed in parenting styles, in how they think about authority. Are you kind of a mini dictator at home, or are you a collegial collaborative type? These people can get activated if a demagogue comes on the scene. For almost 10 years now, Donald Trump has appealed to certain groups who are more comfortable with authoritarian contexts. He created a big tent for every kind of political extremist, every kind of racist, from people who were Southern racists to neo-Nazis. Those people who already have authoritarian views on the world can be very seduced by a politician who comes and says, I am a strong man. I will decide things for you. I will bring order into society. And it becomes a natural meeting of that kind of person with that kind of leader. And so together, all of this created an environment where many Americans felt that they could see themselves in some kind of political system that's not a democracy. Shark Boy from Reddit asks, how do dictators actually make their money? The history of dictatorship and the history of corruption are completely entwined. At their extreme, you have something called kleptocracy. That is when it's a state of thieves. An example was Gaddafi in Libya, where the leader and his cronies were stealing from state agencies. They were expropriating private citizens' factories. They were taking over state agencies and funneling the money to Swiss bank accounts. The same thing is true of Putin's Russia, which is a fully formed kleptocracy, where Putin and his cronies kind of plunder, for example, Gazprom, the state energy conglomerate. They take profits out of state agencies. So instead of working for the people, the agency works to fund the dictator. And the money today goes less to Swiss bank accounts than to offshore accounts. For example, Vladimir Putin, after 20 years in power, is now one of the very richest men in the world. So dictators make money in an illegitimate fashion, which is why they use propaganda, violence, repression to make sure that none of their secrets come out. Based Mike Lee writes, name a fascist dictator whose agenda entailed limiting the size, cost, and power of government. Well, Senator Lee, there is one, Augusto Pinochet, the bloody military dictator of Chile who came to power through a US-backed coup and made Chile a laboratory of neoliberal economics, privatizations, deregulations, cutting social services. And at first, this provided a boost to the economy, mostly to giant corporations, including American corporations. But within a few years, it caused bank failures, massive hardship, and people went into debt. And so the long view is that we can think of dictators as always expanding the government and causing a lot of waste and bloat in the process, actually. But even when they cut the size of the government, it doesn't end up well. Johnson Tao says, I don't understand. Why do people support dictators? It can seem strange that people support dictators who take their rights away, because what dictators want you to do is not only betray other people in your communities, you're going to inform on them, you're going to look the other way when your loved ones get taken away by the secret police. They also want you to betray yourself. They want you to lose your moral compass, to self-censor. Dictators are very skilled at posing as saviors, at creating crises or exploiting crises and then posing themselves as the solution. Whether it's an economic crisis or the perception of social unrest, one of the classic dictator narratives for 100 years is that only the authoritarian is going to keep people safe against the threat of immigrants coming across the border. Now, there's a grain of truth always to this because immigrants too come over the border. But what dictators do is say that immigrants are coming over the border to rape our women, to take our jobs, to dilute our population because they're the wrong skin color and the wrong faith. And so the same excuses for 100 years are used to justify their national purity campaigns. Mussolini used to talk about black, brown, and yellow people, that's his words, coming across the border and having too many babies. These are old narratives, and they work because they make people fearful for their security, for their family, and then the dictator is there to say, I alone can fix it. Snowflake 100% pure masshole says, why is he even having rallies? He's referring to President Trump. US presidents don't have rallies. Dictators have rallies. Hitler had rallies. Authoritarians love adulation and they love opportunities to perform because rallies are an occasion where people come out in mass numbers to show their loyalty. And what dictators care about more than anything is people showing loyalty to them on camera. And so that's one reason, whether they're right or left or anti-colonial or imperialist, they all have rallies. Early on, Joseph Goebbels, who later became Hitler's propaganda chief, he realized that Hitler was terrible in a studio. He was wooden. He needed the energy of crowds to come alive. And that's why Goebbels hit on this idea of having rallies nonstop. And that has remained a feature of dictatorship. Think of Mobutu Sese Seko in the Congo, constantly had rallies where he dressed up. His thing was being the leopard. He sat on a throne. These are shows of power and omnipotence. Here's a question from the political discussion subreddit. Does the internet improve democracy or enhance the potential for dictatorship? The internet is a double-edged tool. It has allowed dissidents who are operating in repressive contexts to have new audiences they would never have had, such as the protesters in 2019 in Moscow, who live streamed on Twitter themselves getting arrested, having millions and millions of views. However, the internet has allowed dictators to centralize and speed up the circulation of their propaganda. Now, this goes back all the way to the beginning of authoritarianism. Smart dictators, savvy dictators, have always known how to take the latest media technology and use it to their advantage. So Mussolini used newsreels, and he was a great performer. Hitler had that crazy ranting voice, so he was very effective with radio. Modi of India, when he first ran for office, and he's the most followed leader on Instagram in the world right now, he used holograms, so he could be in 100 different cities at the same time. time, up through Bolsonaro in Brazil and Trump, who used social media very, very effectively. So the internet is a tool like other tools before it. However, the internet has the ability to hugely increase the volume of propaganda and the circulation of propaganda. At E. Harding 2000 asks, is Orban a fascist? Viktor Orban, Prime Minister of Hungary, has fascist qualities, but today, in the 21st century, fascism looks different. You have elections, you keep them going, but you manipulate the system by control of the media, by control of the judiciary and the election apparatus to make sure that the election goes out your way. Orban has become a hero to the new right because he has perfected what we call electoral autocracy. You keep elections going, but you find ways to get the results that you need. So that's different from old school fascism. Orban has gotten his cronies to buy important media properties. So it's indirect control of the media. And you control the electoral system. You hollow out the institutions so that everybody's loyal to you. So these are things that go back to fascism, but today they take place within a multi-party state. One continuity of Orban with classic fascism is trying to grow the population, but only some people are encouraged to have babies, white Christians. Immigrants are not encouraged to have babies. Indeed, he's trying to get rid of immigrants and have them deported. Another continuity is homophobia. LGBTQ people have been legislated bureaucratically out of existence, and that goes back to fascism. Anybody who does not fit those roles of what they call the natural family, one man, one woman, both straight, does not have a future in Hungary. At Onzi XS says, Pinochet was evil, but he made Chile what it is today. Benevolent dictator? I study dictators. I do not believe any dictator is benevolent because the definition of a dictator is someone who represses the popular will. There's no voting in a classic dictatorship. There's no free press. If you are an opponent of the regime, you will be sent to jail or killed. That's not, to me, the definition of benevolence. At Tyler E. Harris asks, honest question, but why do dictators even bother to hold elections? They're just going to rig anyway. Today, dictators keep elections going, and so we often call them authoritarians rather than dictators, but they rig the system through colonizing the media so the opposition's message can't get there. They'll put a prominent opponent under house arrest. That's what Vladimir Putin did with Alexei Navalny, who was extremely popular. He sent him to jail, so he couldn't be a candidate. So the new system is called electoral autocracy. You hold elections, but you use all these tricks to make sure that they're not free and fair elections. You can even, once you feel you've amassed enough power, hold an election and then just refuse to recognize the results if you have lost. And we have several examples of that recently. The biggest one in Venezuela, still playing out today. Maduro, who lost an election to the opposition, refused to leave office. In 2023, we had Bolsonaro trying to have a coup because he was claiming he actually won the election when he lost. And in the United States, Donald Trump claimed that he won the 2020 election when he did not. Epic Thundercat says, at what point do we start calling what Elon Musk is doing inside our government a coup? As a historian of coups, I consider this to be a situation that merits the word coup. So coups happen when people inside state institutions go rogue. This is different. This is unprecedented. A private citizen, the richest man in the world, has a group of 19, 20-year-old coders who have come in as shock troops and are taking citizens' data and closing down entire government agencies. When we think of traditional coups, often perpetrated by the military, you have foot soldiers who do the work of closing off the buildings, of making sure that the actual government, the old government they're trying to overthrow, can no longer get in. What we have here is a kind of digital paramilitaries, a group of people who have taken over and they've captured the data, they've captured the government buildings. They were sleeping there 24/7, and elected officials could not come in. When our own elected officials are not allowed to enter into government buildings because someone else is preventing them who has not been elected or officially in charge of any government agency, that qualifies as a coup. Pat Berry, despondent American, asks, how do the oligarchs who help authoritarians come into power fare after the dictator has what he wants? Does he ever turn on them? Oligarchs are immensely wealthy and powerful individuals who can help to change the political environment by putting certain candidates in office. This was the case with Putin. He was chosen to run for president in 2000 by oligarchs. One of the pillars of authoritarianism is what's called authoritarian bargains. These are deals that leaders make with powerful people. They could be oligarchs in the media area, in finance, in business. They could also be faith leaders. Some faith leaders are so powerful to be almost like oligarchs. And so these people team up. The dictator needs these people to legitimate them, to tell the rest of the population, because they're so influential, that this guy is actually okay. He may be violent, but he's our guy. The problem with this is inevitably, when the dictator has seen that the oligarch has outlived his usefulness, they will throw them under the bus. Early oligarchs who brought Putin to power, he tried to then colonize or seize their assets. And if they didn't agree to give him their assets, he tried to jail them or they had to go into exile. There's been something called sudden Russian death syndrome, where many, many powerful elites connected with the energy industry have fallen out of windows or gone into the hospital and never emerged again because Putin is cleaning house. Tanvir Hassan asks, how can a dictator be good for a nation? Dictators certainly want to be seen as being good for the nation. And many people become fans of dictators because dictators are into infrastructure. They have huge egos. They want to be identified with grandiose public works. Mussolini built sports stadiums. He built miles of railroads, and the myth was that he made the trains run on time. Hitler built the Autobahn, the high-speed highways. Today, in Turkey, Erdogan has very large construction projects such as the Istanbul Canal. And so there's a sense of modernity and things happening. The problem is when you don't have a free press, nobody can be tracking with accurate statistics how these big public works are affecting the economy and what kind of corruption is happening behind the scenes. So dictators can attract a lot of support by people who fall for the appearances. Look, he's doing things. Other people are not doing things. The dictator gets things done. However, it's only later that the economic and social outcome of those big projects comes to light. Alex Gretsch asks, why do dictators love Trump? We know that Trump loves dictators. He even has talked about exchanging love letters with the leader of North Korea, not someone you would often think of as a particularly sentimental type. Do dictators love Trump? That's unclear. Dictators are transactional. They use each other. If dictators are loving Trump at the moment, it's because they think that he can be an ally, that they can get something from him. If we take as the example Vladimir Putin, he and Trump have a good relationship, and yet he allows Trump to be mocked on Russian television as a useful fool. So this is an example of them using each other, which is what dictators know how to do beautifully. At Eric E. Warren asks, why do dictators always blame media, opposition, foreign countries, and terror groups? Dictators are expert at creating a sense of existential dread. So it's not just polarization. We don't agree, but we're in the same framework. We agree to disagree. They go for what I call survivalism. It's me or you, and only one of us is going to survive. This is what the Nazis did with the Jews. This is what racists everywhere do with non-white peoples. They create a sense of existential dread that this group must be attacked, and sometimes, in the case of genocide, must be removed from the face of the earth in order for our country to have peace and safety. Often, the enemy is a foreign country, and there's a long history of dictators saying that their countries have been victimized. Mussolini talked about Italy as victimized by more powerful countries. democracies, up to Xi Jinping, who has a long history of talking about Chinese victimization by the West, or Vladimir Putin, Russia's victimization by the West. And so these are very powerful narratives that can justify foreign invasion. The dictator says, we've been victimized. It's time for us to protect ourselves by getting more territory. Here's a question from Magic. Is Xi Jinping a dictator? Not only is Xi Jinping a dictator, the communist system only permits dictators, but Xi Jinping is becoming more of a dictator. This is one way we can track how dictatorship expands. Is your personality cult becoming more prominent? Check. Xi Jinping's cult is becoming more prominent. Are you trying to rehabilitate past dictators to kind of bolster your own glory? Check. Xi Jinping is talking a lot about Mao and styling himself as the inheritor of Mao. Here's a question from Peter Quince. Why do dictators and wannabe dictators always want more land? That's kind of in the nature of being the dictator. You always want more power. You always want more control. You also want more assets. You want more natural resources to exploit if you're corrupt. The same narratives get put forth over and over again, narratives of national purity. So, for example, the Nazis, it wasn't enough to have conquest of Germans. You had to go into Austria because there are people. Or you have these myths of national unification, and that's being used right now by Xi Jinping, a communist, for Taiwan, that Taiwan must be China because it needs to be reunified as though it was part of China to begin with. The same with Putin and Ukraine, that they called the conquest of Ukraine a reunification. So these are imperialist justifying narratives, and dictators use them over and over again. So it's no surprise to find President Trump, a man of authoritarian leanings, having come back to power and becoming an imperialist, talking about Canada becoming the 51st American state, talking about taking control of Greenland. So those are all the questions for today. Thank you for watching.
Check. There I am. Huh. Thank you, Dr. Brain. Sigoli, Swagwag, again, I wanted to say a big yonko for anyone who has been lurking and joining in Faustian, Dr. Brain. I am going to have this posted as soon as we rate out. I did have another film set up to watch. However, something has come up with Fantastic Kitty, and I have to we have to go do some IRL type stuff, and so I'm going to save that for the morning. I'm hoping maybe around 10 a.m. Eastern I can share it. It's a full documentary, about an hour and a half, and it covers what American Jewish people, how their views of Israel are changing. The youth, the young adults and teens of the Jewish community. And I wanted to do something like this because we always get, with this conflict that's happening, we call it a conflict, a genocide, an erasure of culture, in Gaza. So the neat thing about the first channel, again, if you missed the first one, it's only 20 minutes long, and I think it's well worth the watch, but it discusses the comparison of how to erase people and how it was used in North America with the First Nations people and how it's being used in Gaza. So if you're interested in kind of seeing that comparison, that will be up. That's the first part of our stream today, and then the professor who just answered questions regarding dictatorships and methodologies in becoming a dictator and in the history of dictatorships. So I found that really interesting. I hope you did too. But I do have to get going. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play a rendition of The Peaceful Warrior, which we tried to do. Actually, no. What I'm going to do is I'm going to play a poem that I wrote that was done. Nightbot deleted the message. Why? Okay, looks like you got it in there, Fostian. So yeah, so I'm gonna play a version of a song, a poem I wrote, called "A Beautiful Thing." It's really about um, being grateful for the things that we have. I mean, I'm living in what we now know as Canada, in a privileged life in comparison or in reality. Is it deleted your post again? Oh, you posted a link. That's why. You may want to whisper that to me, whatever that is, Boston. So okay, I see. Except because I'm not a singer and I'm not a songwriter, or I'm not a singer or a musician, I handed this idea off to a friend of ours named Composy. So this song is about being grateful for what we have. I mean, in reality, as much as colonization and systemic racism still exists in North America, and it does, um, we are still living a life that's much better than other parts of the world. When we think of all the gang wars that are happening in Haiti, we're talking about the invasion of Russia in the Ukraine and Israel into um, Gaza and Palestine. There's conflicts around the world that are greater than what we're dealing with at the moment here. That being said, knock on wood that this is not going to get worse here in the upcoming couple of years. That we're going to have to deal with a totalitarian type government in the U.S. Hey, Ninja Can, welcome in. Thank you for joining us. You're actually just catching us on the way out, but I appreciate you being here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to aim for 10 o'clock tomorrow morning to share the other film that I wanted to share today. And again, it's going to reflect the changing views of American Jewish people on what they are now thinking or how they view the Israel. And I think that I just wanted to get a Jewish perspective on things, and I think particularly the young Jewish people, because they are the ones who are coming up and are going to become the next leaders and rabbis and all the other aspects of their culture. And so I think it'll be interesting. I haven't watched it, so it's going to be a learning thing for me as well to understand what's happening. And yes, you know what? Inclusivity is one of those things that we. Did I put this here? Oh, or maybe. Oh, no, I didn't. I must be in the other channel. Okay, but DEI is a thing, and the reason we have it is to try to make all humans kind of relate to each other on an equal level. Like that the one documentary said, we are looking at things from an indigenous perspective, and we're talking about indigenous perspectives from around the world because many of them feel the same way. If we look at the teachings of the Aborigines of Australia, or you talk about or listen to the teachings of some of the spiritualities of the Palestinians, and compare them to the North American indigenous peoples, there's a great number of similarities actually in the belief systems. Some of the names are different, some of the characters and the teachings are different, but they're very similar. So I'm going to get the song playing, and we're going to go raid out. So if anybody is able to stick around just for the raid to say hi to the next streamer, please do. I'll put the raid call in the chat while this is playing, and then we'll go over and we'll see who's on. And this is our friend Composi doing a rendition of A Beautiful Thing.
We're going to find out what happens. I feel the softness of a kitten's fur and listen to that affectionate purr. I see it playfully chase a string and think life is a beautiful thing. I feel the heat from the rays of the sun, and the walks in the moonlight are always fun to have a sweetheart who listens to me sing. Life I know is such a beautiful thing. I watch the wings spread in the sky as its feathered arms carry it so high. And how about the happiness a newborn brings? Can life not at times be a beautiful thing? What would I do if I ever lose my eyes? Would it make me less any wise? Would I not still have the gift of feeling, which goes to prove that life is such a beautiful thing? Should having no arms make me sad? Should having no legs make me mad? If life is such a beautiful thing, then I'm thankful for what I should have be my thing. I feel the softness of a kitten's fur and listen to its affectionate purr. I see it playfully chase a string and think life is a beautiful thing. Lyrics by Galiandi.
Policies around COVID and zero COVID policy, which was a fantasy from the beginning for anyone with any judgment. So we know they did that. It's disgusting that he goes around saying it as though, well, it's just what we did, So we're public health. Give me a break. But
they're getting ready to do it. They're getting ready to do it again, by the way. And we're going to be talking about things like measles and bird flu and whatever else is out there. once again, they leave the basic constructs of public health at the door. The concept of a lockdown, for example, or what they're doing now with culling birds. You know, the idea is you quarantine the few to protect the many. You don't quarantine the many to protect the few. I mean, that's insanity.
Insanity. I agree. And whether we have a new bird flu to talk about at some point here, but I want to go back around on measles and talk a little bit about the sort of the practice of medicine generally. I was actually dealing with it this morning with a patient. Now, I don't know if you've seen adult measles, but it's brutal. It's way worse than pediatric measles. But it's brutal, brutal. And I retook the measles vaccine about 7 or 8 years ago because it became clear there was another outbreak then, and it was clear that people born before 1962 or something, the vaccine was not good. So don't even bother checking your antibodies. Just go ahead and take the vaccine, which I did. I had no side effects. And I had a patient this morning talking about a family member who's early adolescent in Texas, around the region of the outbreak, has never had any vaccine exposure. Do you vaccinate that child? And again, my basic position was, well, she and her pediatrician should make that decision. I would probably do it because I've seen adolescent and adult measles. I don't like it. It's not a cool thing at all. But if somebody decided not to do it, that's between the patient. And the patients are vehemently anti-vaccine. The family is anyway. What do you think? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, again, a couple thoughts. Number one, and I would ask you, when you got, quote, vaccinated for measles, did you get just the measles vaccine or did you take an MMR? Or just measles, mumps, and rubella?
I believe I was. I don't remember. It would have been weird if I took an MMR, but that's maybe all I could have gotten at the time.
And the reason I bring this up is because there's no question that there's been a significant association, again, not proven causality, but an association between ill effects and the MMR vaccine, which is a combo of measles, mumps, and rubella that is standard in this country for children to get. Interestingly, Japan, for example, outlawed the MMR, that combined vaccine, in 1993.